My husband didn't show up at my mom's funeral, and what I found the next day made my entire world crumble. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lena Ward. I'm 34, and last week, I buried my mom. It was the hardest day of my life. She was my best friend, the one who always knew what to say when life got rough. I thought my husband, Evan, would be there to hold my hand, but he never showed up. He texted me that morning, saying he had an urgent work meeting he couldn't miss. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, something felt off. As I stood by my mom's coffin, I kept looking at the door, hoping he'd walk in, even if it was late. But he didn't. My family noticed. My aunt whispered to my cousin, "He didn't come?" That's not a good sign. I pretended not to hear, but their words hit me like cold rain. Everyone's eyes carried quiet judgment, and I felt smaller with every minute that passed. After the funeral, people hugged me, told me to stay strong, and went home. I sat alone in my car, staring at my phone, waiting for a message from him. Something more than sorry, still at work. Nothing came. When I finally got home, he was already asleep, pretending to be exhausted. The house smelled like his cologne, too strong, like he'd sprayed it to hide something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my mom's voice in my head. Pay attention to what people do, not what they say. Evan's absence kept replaying in my mind, and every time I thought about it, my chest tightened. Was work really more important than saying goodbye to my mother? I walked through the dark house, restless, feeling like something had shifted forever. His phone buzzed once on the nightstand, lighting up the room for a second. I didn't check it, not yet. But a quiet fear settled in me. My mom's funeral was supposed to bring my family together, but somehow, it felt like the day I started losing mine. The next morning, the house was too quiet. Evan had already left for work, leaving his half-finished coffee on the counter. I picked up my phone from the table and noticed a missed call from an unknown number, one that had come in late the night before. My hands hesitated over the screen, but curiosity won. When I pressed play, a burst of soft laughter came through the speaker. Then, faint but unmistakable, Evan's voice. He was joking about something, his tone light and easy, nothing like the man who had claimed to be drowning in work. I replayed the voicemail 3 times, my stomach tightening each time. The laughter wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone from his office either. I knew his colleagues. The woman's voice was playful, teasing, and the sound of glasses clinking in the background made my throat go dry. Trying to shake the unease, I forced myself to focus on simple chores. I remembered Evan's suit still at the cleaners, the one he had planned to wear to the funeral but didn't have time to pick up. I drove there, hoping the errand would quiet my thoughts. The woman behind the counter smiled politely and handed me the neatly wrapped garment. When I reached into the bag to check it, something thin and folded slipped out, a receipt. I unfolded it slowly. It was from a downtown restaurant, one of those places you needed reservations for weeks in advance. The total was far too high for a lunch meeting. My eyes moved down the page until I saw the date, the day of my mother's funeral. My fingers went cold. At the bottom, the hostess had signed the check with a looping heart beside her name. S. I stood frozen at the counter, pretending to examine the suit, while the truth crept over me like a chill. Evan had been there, whining and dining someone while I was saying goodbye to my mother. The image felt surreal, him laughing, her smiling across the table, while I stood graveside clutching a handful of roses. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into my purse. On the drive home, the world outside blurred. Every stoplight felt endless, every memory heavier. That single heart drawn on the paper pulsed in my mind like a warning, one I couldn't ignore anymore. The sun had barely risen when I stepped outside to grab the mail. The air smelled of damp grass and the faint smoke from someone's fireplace. Mr. Halpern, my next-door neighbor, was trimming his hedges. He lifted his hand in a friendly wave and called out, "Morning, Lena. How are you holding up?" I forced a smile, though my chest felt heavy. He shook his head sadly and said, "Tough week for you, huh? I meant to tell you, I saw Evan's car the other day. Looked like he was waiting for you or something." My hand froze midair. "Oh, where?" I asked as casually as I could. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "By that little hotel off Hawthorne Street. You know, the one with the ivy on the walls. Thought maybe you two were staying there for a bit of quiet time." I nodded, my throat tightening. "Right, yeah, that," I said, trying to sound normal. My smile felt like glass about to crack. He went on about his garden, but I barely heard a word. My pulse drummed in my ears as I clutched the mail tighter. When I got inside, I leaned against the door and tried to breathe. Evan's car. The hotel. The same day. The picture formed too easily now, filling in the blanks I'd been avoiding. I told myself I needed proof before I jumped to conclusions. Proof, not assumptions. By nightfall, I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open, and a cup of untouched coffee beside me. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge. I logged into our shared bank account, fingers trembling slightly. The numbers blurred at first, then sharpened as I scrolled through the transactions. There it was, the hotel name Mr. Halpern had mentioned. Not once, but several times. Each charge spaced a few weeks apart. Always the same place, always on weekdays. The pattern was too clean to be coincidence. I clicked on the oldest entry, tracing the dates backward, watching them form a timeline of betrayal. My reflection in the laptop screen looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, disbelief turning slowly into something colder. When I finally closed the computer, the house seemed to echo around me. Every detail felt sharper, louder, as if the truth had been sitting here all along, waiting for me to finally see it. I waited all afternoon, the house spotless though I hadn't meant to clean. The photo of my mom sat in the center of the table, her calm smile watching me like she always did when I needed strength. When Evan's car finally pulled into the driveway, my pulse quickened. I told myself to stay steady, to ask, not accuse. He walked in, loosened his tie, and gave me a quick kiss on the head, the same way someone might pat a dog before heading to bed. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, his tone too casual. I pointed toward the chair across from mine. "We need to talk." He hesitated but sat down, glancing at the framed photo in front of him. "What's this about?" I slid the receipt across the table, the one from that fancy restaurant. His eyes flickered for half a second, then he leaned back and sighed. "Lena, are we really doing this? Were you there the day of the funeral?" I asked quietly. He rubbed his temples, shaking his head. "You've been under so much stress lately. I get it. Losing your mom, it's a lot. But you're seeing things that aren't there." My chest tightened. "So you're saying Mr. Halpern imagined your car at that hotel? The same one that keeps showing up on our bank statements?" His tone softened, syrupy and careful. "You're grieving. It's making you suspicious. I would never do that to you." For a moment, doubt slithered in. Maybe he was right. Maybe my grief was twisting things. His voice had that steady, calm rhythm that always made me second-guess myself. But then his phone buzzed on the table. We both looked down at the same time. The screen lit up with a short message. "Same time tomorrow?" followed by a single letter S. The air between us froze. He snatched the phone quickly, but not fast enough. The mask slipped from his face, replaced by a flash of panic before he forced a laugh. "It's nothing, Lena. Just someone from work." I didn't speak. My mom's picture sat between us, her eyes fixed on him. Evan stood up, muttering something about me needing rest, and walked away. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the edge of the table, staring at the phone's faint glow until it faded to black. The attic smelled of dust and cedar, the kind of air that clung to your clothes. I climbed the narrow steps, a flashlight in one hand and a box of tissues in the other. I'd planned to find my mom's old photo album, the one with the beach pictures from when I was a kid. I needed something gentle to look at, something that reminded me of her laugh instead of everything that had gone wrong downstairs. The boxes were stacked unevenly, labeled with faded ink, winter clothes, Christmas, old papers. Toward the back, I spotted one that wasn't marked at all. It was newer than the others, the tape clean and the handwriting on the lid unmistakably Evan. My first thought was that it might be work stuff, but curiosity pushed me to open it. Inside was a smaller velvet box, deep red, the kind that holds something delicate. My breath caught when I lifted the lid. A silver necklace lay coiled inside, the pendant shaped like a tiny crescent. I'd seen it before, glinting against someone's collarbone at the office. Sierra Lang. She had worn it just last week when she stopped by my desk with a soft smile, telling me how sorry she was for my loss. She'd said she understood grief, that she'd been through something similar. I remember thanking her, even feeling comforted for a moment. Now that same necklace lay in my hand. I sat back on my heels, the flashlight beam shaking. The memory of the text message, "Same time tomorrow?" flashed through my mind. The letter S, Sierra's gentle eyes, her careful words. Everything lined up too perfectly. I put the box down and pressed a hand to my forehead. My heartbeat was loud, uneven. I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead, I stayed perfectly still, staring at the silver chain as if it might move on its own. When I finally closed the box, I did it slowly, making sure the clasp clicked shut. The sound felt final. I pushed the carton back into the shadows, but the truth stayed with me, heavier than before. Sierra, the woman who had sat beside me, comforting me about my mother, had been the same one waiting for my husband. The next morning, I woke up with my decision already settled in my chest. No tears, no yelling. I had wasted enough emotion on people who didn't deserve it. Evan moved around the kitchen like nothing was wrong, humming under his breath while buttering toast. I smiled back when he looked at me, pretending his act still worked. Inside, I was already planning. For the next few days, I kept everything steady, cooking his favorite meals, asking about work, laughing at the right moments. He seemed relieved, even affectionate again, convinced I had accepted his excuses. I let him think that. Every time he left the room, I moved quietly, collecting what I needed. The receipt from the restaurant stayed tucked in my purse. The messages on his phone. I managed to photograph those when he showered, my hands shaking as I pressed the buttons fast. The necklace from the attic I wrapped in a napkin and hid in my dresser drawer. Proof was starting to build, neat and organized, each piece like a brick in the wall I was stacking between us. At work, I kept my distance from Sierra. She still smiled at me, the same soft sympathy she'd worn since the funeral. I returned it with calm politeness, as if I hadn't already seen the proof of her betrayal sitting in a velvet box upstairs. When she mentioned how busy her week had been, I asked if she'd like to come by for dinner soon, just to relax. She agreed without hesitation. That night, I asked Evan if he could clear his schedule for Friday. I want to make a real meal, I told him. It feels like we've both been so disconnected. His face softened, almost guilty, and he promised he'd be there. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and turned away so he wouldn't see the coldness behind my eyes. Over the next 2 days, I set everything in motion. I cleaned the house, arranged flowers, even ironed the tablecloth my mother loved. On the counter, I placed 2 wine glasses, one for him, one for her. They wouldn't know until they arrived, until they saw each other across my table. I didn't plan to shout or cry. I wanted them to see what they had done while I stayed perfectly calm. By the time the doorbell rang, the house looked perfect. The candles flickered softly, the table gleamed, and a calm smile rested on my face like a mask I'd rehearsed for days. Evan stood beside me, dressed neatly, pouring wine as if this was just another Friday night. When I opened the door, Sierra stood there, holding a bottle of white and wearing the same cautious smile she always used at work. Her eyes met mine for a split second before she spotted Evan behind me. The color drained from her face. Evan's hand froze midair, the corkscrew still in his grip. For a long, fragile moment, no one spoke. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. My voice was even too calm. She hesitated, but the weight of silence pushed her forward. Evan's throat bobbed as he muttered, "What's going on, Lena?" I turned to the dining room where my father, my brother, and my aunt were already seated. They looked surprised when Sierra walked in but stayed quiet. I'd told them it was a small dinner to thank everyone who had supported me lately. I suppose that was still true. We sat. The air was heavy enough to feel. Evan tried to speak first, but I lifted a hand. "Let's start with this." I placed the folded restaurant receipt on the table. His eyes flicked to it, then away. "And this?" I pulled out my phone and slid it across the surface, the screen glowing with the message from S. Sierra's hand trembled. No one moved as I reached for the small velvet box from my purse. I set it beside the wine bottle, flipping it open so the necklace caught the candlelight. The chain glittered like a confession neither of them could deny. Sierra swallowed hard. "Lena, I cut her off, still calm. "You don't get to speak right now." I looked at Evan next. "You didn't just lie. You left me standing alone while I buried my mother." His mouth opened, but no sound came. My family sat frozen, their faces a mix of pity and disbelief. I could feel my mother's photo watching from the mantel, her quiet strength holding me steady. Finally, I pushed back my chair and stood. "You didn't just cheat on me," I said, my voice shaking now. "You abandoned me the day I buried my mother." The room stayed silent except for the soft clink of the necklace as I closed the box. The silence after my words stretched too long. Evan's chair scraped hard against the floor as he pushed back, face red and jaw tight. "You set me up," he hissed, pointing at me like I'd wronged him. I didn't move. My father's hand twitched on the table, ready to stand, but I shook my head. Evan looked at Sierra, disbelief twisting into anger. "You came here? What the hell were you thinking?" She stared at her hands, voice trembling. "I didn't know, Lena, I swear. I didn't know about the funeral. I kept my eyes on her." "That's the part you're sorry for?" My tone came out flat, almost tired. "Not the rest." Sierra's lips parted, but nothing followed. Evan grabbed his coat and stormed toward the door, muttering under his breath. The front door slammed so hard the candles flickered out. Sierra stood there frozen, eyes glassy, then whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." I walked past her without answering. She left quietly, heels clicking against the floor until the sound disappeared. The next morning, my father showed up early, his jaw set in that familiar way that meant he'd already decided something. My brother was with him. "We'll handle this," my dad said simply. I didn't ask what he meant. Later, I heard the story from someone at Evan's office. My father and brother had walked in while Evan was in a meeting. No yelling, just firm, quiet words. They told him what he'd done, how he'd humiliated me, how a man who could abandon his wife at her mother's funeral had no business hiding behind a desk. No one stopped them. Evan packed his things that afternoon and left. By the end of the week, Sierra handed in her resignation. The whispers at work were too much. She couldn't face anyone. Her desk was cleared out by Monday morning. the spot where she used to sit now empty and cold. When I got home that night, I changed the locks. The sound of the drill biting into the doorframe felt final, like a door closing on everything I'd carried for too long. I filed the divorce papers the next day, my signature steady, my heart oddly quiet. For the first time in weeks, I slept without waking. I spent the next weekend surrounded by boxes that smelled faintly of my mother's perfume. The attic light was dim, dust floating through the air like quiet memories. Sorting through her things had felt impossible before, but now, after everything, I needed it, something pure to hold on to. I opened each box carefully, folding her sweaters, flipping through her handwritten recipes, the corners stained with butter and sugar. Near the bottom of one box, tucked between two books, I found an envelope with my name written across it. The handwriting stopped me cold. I ran my thumb over the familiar loops of each letter, tracing the ink like it might fade if I blinked. It was sealed. My throat tightened as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. Her voice came to life in the lines she'd written, steady and loving. "Mylena," it began, "if you're reading this, it means life has taken a turn that's testing you. I want you to remember something. You were never meant to shrink for anyone. Don't let anyone make you small. You were always meant to be brave, even when it breaks you first." I couldn't breathe for a moment. The attic felt both silent and deafening, like the world had stopped just to let her words sink in. My chest ached, and I pressed the letter against my heart, closing my eyes. It was as if she knew exactly when I'd need to hear it, as if she'd written it for this very moment. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by pieces of her life, things she'd loved, things she'd saved, and I realized she had always been preparing me to stand on my own. The anger, the betrayal, the humiliation, they were still there, but her words softened the edges of it all. When I finally folded the letter back into its envelope, my hands felt steadier. I placed it in my lap, looking at her handwriting one more time. She hadn't just given me comfort, she'd given me permission to move forward, to finish what I'd started, to live without fear of losing anyone else's approval. I whispered, "I'll be brave, Mom." And for the first time since she'd gone, I believed I could be. The house echoed when I walked through it for the last time. Empty rooms, bare walls, nothing left but faint outlines where pictures once hung. I ran my hand along the hallway, remembering the nights I'd spent pacing there, waiting for answers that never came. Now it felt different, quiet but not lonely. Selling it hadn't been easy, but holding on to it had felt worse. The papers were signed a week later. I packed the last box into the back of my car, looked at the driveway one final time, and drove away without glancing in the mirror. The small cottage near the coast waited for me, a simple place with peeling paint and wide windows that faced the ocean. When I first stepped inside, the sound of the waves filled every corner. It didn't feel like starting over. It felt like finally breathing. Days passed softly there. I learned to wake up without dread, to cook just for myself, to listen to the wind instead of the hum of someone else's voice. The ache was still there, but it no longer ruled me. I kept my mother's letter framed by the window, the words steadying me whenever doubt tried to creep back in. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. "Evan." The message was short. "I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, waiting for the old rush of anger or sadness, but it didn't come. Only calm. I typed back slowly, each word deliberate. "You already had won. On the day I needed you most." I hit send and placed the phone face down. The ocean kept roaring outside, like it agreed. The next morning, I carried a small urn to the water's edge. The sun was rising, pale gold spilling over the wave. I waded in until the water touched my knees and opened the lid. The ashes drifted out gently, carried away by the tide. I whispered a quiet thank you, to her, to myself, to everything I'd survived. As the current spread the last of her into the horizon, I felt something lift from my chest. For the first time in a long while, peace didn't feel like something far away. It was right there, in the salt air, in my lungs, in the life still waiting ahead. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this emotional story. Imagine losing your mom, only for your husband to betray you the very same day. Heartbreaking, right? But sometimes the worst moments lead us to the strongest versions of ourselves. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more real-life stories. See you in the next one. Bye!